On today's video for the 472-500, I'm going to talk about the big bad boy intake in the Cadillac world. CAD company calls this the 1475. It was originally designed by Potter and Cadillac Performance Parts. Uh, CAD company has continued to make it after they bought out Potter and all the molds and everything, so it can keep going. I have not had this on the flow bench. A couple of reasons. I think it outflows my flow bench. And it probably doesn't need to. It really flows enough that it's like I said, it's the big bad boy one. I mean, this thing has got big runners. It's meant for the boogeyman heads. It's basically a single carburetor tunnel ram, I guess is the best way to describe it. Now, as far as I know, this was partially designed by Cossie when he was helping out Potter after they met at one of the Engine Master deals. It's very similar to one that Cossie was doing at the time, but I don't know all the details of it. When I tried to run this intake, I had some trouble. And I've since learned what I think my mistake was. Like I said, this intake flows a lot. And you really need boogeyman heads. It's really meant for the bigger heads. And I was running as cast heads with Richard Holdner, and I didn't feel like I had enough flow. This really takes some flow. But the other mistake I was making was I was running too big a carburetor. I was trying to carburate it like I was used to with some of the bigger big blocks, and I had like a 1450 CFM Dominator on top of it. Now, I've talked to some guys since then that have had pretty good luck with this intake. And what they do is they run a 1050, and that makes sense. Like I said, the runner is good sized. And so if we could get enough airflow, that would be okay. I suspect this probably flows almost 500 CFM. And remember, the regular as cast head is only like 360. And that's why the other intake, the Bulldog intake, worked better with it than this one. And when I had trouble, I chose to go to a smaller intake. But the smaller carb will work too. Now, remember, this has real straight runners. It's basically tunnel ram. And in racing and whatnot, that's what we were talking about. You want a straight shot. And with the boogeyman heads, you have a much straighter shot in the port. With this intake, it's basically straight down. It's just, if you're going to run ported boogeyman heads, you're going to want this intake. And like I said, it's the 1475, now made by CAD company. Potter called it the boogeyman, but I never understood that because he called the other intake the boogeyman too. But the goal would be to undercarb it a little bit unless the head is all out. Now, this one was ported by Eric Weingartner. And if you look in my links of other channels, Eric Weingartner is in there. And he has done the intake, and he's done some work on the heads, and CAD company has him working on trying to get the head up to that like 500 CFM. I mean, if we could have 500 CFM out of the boogeyman head and this intake, I mean, you're talking about motors that are naturally aspirated that are well over 1,000 horsepower. Now, CAD company has gotten pretty close to that with a decent intake and well-ported boogeyman heads. He has hit like 900 horsepower. But that elusive 1,000 horsepower has been a little off, and technically we need a little more flow to make that happen. Like I said, if we could hit 500 CFM and this bad boy intake and a big carburetor, I mean, you're talking 1,000, 1,200 horsepower, naturally aspirated, no problem. Now, like I said, if you're going to run it on a more mild head, the trick to making this work, seems to be the 1050 Dominator, or even maybe one of those 1000 CFM regular square flanges that goes to the Dominator pattern. But one motor that CAD company did using this intake made 525 foot-pounds at 2500 RPM and 750 foot-pounds at 4700 RPM. And that's nothing to joke about. I mean, that's up in the range of, oh my God, torque. I mean, it's up there. It made 776 horsepower at 6,000 RPM. And that was on just ported. And when I talked about the as-cast Boogeyman heads with the Bulldog intake, that was a good match. But you also have to remember that's as-cast heads, and the Bulldog intake at that point is almost giving you everything it's got. So if you want to go up from there and start porting the Boogeyman heads, trying to get more flow out of it, more power out of it, then you need to go up to this bad boy. And this is really a big intake. I mean, it's got plenum, it's got big runners, it's tall. I mean, it's probably a good, 4 or 5 inches over stock. I mean, it's way up there. So anyway, that's the 1475 intake. And I just dropped something. Hang on. Try and cut that out. So anyway, sorry, now that I'm back, I just want you to know they also make this in cast iron. Magnet sticks right to it. Part of the reason is some classes, like in some of the tractor pulls and whatnot, require you to run a cast iron manifold. So he went ahead and cast some bad boys in cast iron. Now I'll also tell you, that is one heavy intake. So anyway, if you want it in cast iron, you can get it. All right, I'll talk to you later. That's it.